For those of you who don't know, about 2/3 of all businesses in the United States, whether they're public or private, are all held by family-owned businesses. So they're principally owned by various different definitions by businesses that are within a singular family or perhaps cousins and the like. But what a lot of people don't know is that from generation one to generation two, only about a third of those businesses survive. And so it is a multitude of different reasons, but a lot of it is this inability to perceive or plan for what that succession looks like. So Sara is a business strategist and expert in this field, and so what we wanted to do is introduce Sara. Sara, if you wouldn't mind introduce yourself to everybody and tell them a little about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Dave. This is a topic I'm really, really passionate about for all the reasons that you said. And because one other incredible thing about family businesses is they tend to be very generous employers. They're very generous to their communities. So when those family businesses perpetuate, it's really, really good for communities. It's really good for the families that work for them. For 10 years, I've been an EOS implementer working with family businesses, and I'm the go-to person in the EOS community when there are big family business issues or questions or opportunities to learn. I also help family businesses with the succession planning process and helping them get from one generation to the next. I'm super passionate about the topic, and I'm thrilled that you have me here today with you.
Well, thank you, Sara. And for those of you who have questions, maybe specifically or generally about the topic, feel free to just throw it in the chat and we'll try to answer them either as we go or at the end for sure. We'll address any of the questions that we might have. Plus, we can open it up to questions at the end.
Yeah, I'll dig in here. So everything I'm going to share today will help you with family business succession. It will also help you beyond family business succession. I'm going to talk about how family businesses ideally function. And when you use these tools, it will help you have a smooth family business transition from one generation to the next. Also, by the way, first to second, second to third, third to fourth, fourth to fifth, however you want to do this, these same concepts apply. They just become more important at each transition point. This will help you with having smooth family business succession. It will help you work up to that point, and then, of course, help you move beyond that point. One thing I want to say before I dig into this model that you see in front of you is somebody recently asked me, they knew the statistic, Dave, that you shared about the number that make it from the first to the second. Second to third is an even smaller number. It's something like 12 to 13%. And third generation is known as the generation that kills the family business. Only 3 to 4% make it to the fourth. Somebody asked me recently, is it the second or the third generation that kills the family business? And my response was, I actually think it's the first generation. If the first generation isn't careful about the planning, the second generation will usually cuts and paste that methodology. And then they hand off something that's not working well to the third generation, who then is, trying to coach a football team that has all injured players on it, if you will. So getting into this, let's look at this. In front of you, you see what is called the 3-circle model of the family business system. This was actually created by Harvard. And what you see here is that there are 3 systems happening in a family business. You can see there's the family, of course, that system is all in play in a family business. And then it overlaps with the business. Not all family members typically work in the business. That overlap places where those family members who also work in the business live in this model. And then the addition that Harvard made to this is adding that ownership circle. So there's the family members, there's the people working in the business, and then the owners of the family business. If you here with us today are a family member, you're also working in the business and you're an owner, you're right there in the middle of this model. Perhaps you're a next generation family member who works in the business, but you don't own the business yet. You're interested in owning the business. Then you're in that overlap spot there between the family and business, but not right there in the middle. At any given moment in your family business, you're only in one of those sections. Typically, the most people involved in a family business are there in that business area where they're not owners and they're not family members. So I share that just so you can all understand this model. In family business succession, one thing that often gets mistaken or overlooked is this. You must have succession in the family circle. You must have succession in the business circle. And then you also need to have succession in the ownership circle. So in succession, people, well, I will say this, usually in just running a family business day to day, and then especially in succession, people put these three circles on top of each other and they think of it as just one circle. And when they do that, they're trying to figure out, how do we keep people in the family happy when, oh no, we actually have a family member who's not doing well in the business and they probably should be fired. Oh no, well, we can't fire them because you don't fire family members. That gets very confusing. They'll also put ownership and the business circle on top of each other. And then they think, well, if you own the business, you also have to run the business or you have to have a job in the business. And we'll get into some details that will help you really move these three circles so that they're not completely overlapping, but they look more like what you see here. I'd love it if you go to the next slide. We're going to dig into some details here about what a 100% healthy family business looks like and 6 principles for helping you have a healthy family business. What you see here, we're going to unshare this in a moment, but I'm going to walk through the 3-circle model overview. Ideally and again, I should say this, I'm going to describe a 100% healthy family business, a 100% healthy family business succession. That has never happened. I love the look on your face there, Dave. It will never happen. It never will. It never has. The whole point in me sharing the idea of like 100% healthy is that ideally, as we go through this, you as a participant can take notes. Ideally, you grab a piece of paper or, take out your whatever you keep notes on, and make 2 columns. One column is we do this well, and the other column is either we don't do this at all, that's a big surprise, or whoa, we're really bad at it. So the we do this well column will be congratulations, you're this much closer. Your oh my gosh, this is a surprise or we're terrible at this is your list of things to solve and to find someone to help you fix it. So with that being said, we're going to go into leaders for all 3 circles. Who are the leaders? What are the ideal priorities for each of the 3 circles? What are the ground rules that should be followed? What is the definition of fair? What are the decisions and the meetings you have? Of course, the decisions and the meetings will be the tools that you use to take each step towards succession as you go forward. So if you would unshare this, I think that would be ideal. Whoops, I've lost you. Let's get everybody back here. Here we go. This is a handout that can be shared. I think we can share it anyway if people want to take a look at it, or we can get it to you on email. But I'm going to talk through the first piece, which is leaders. So, oh, there we go. There it is. So in the family circle, there is a leader in the business circle and the ownership circle. In the business circle, that leader is usually called the CEO. That's what we'll call him, CEO or president. For the sake of this model, because I think it's really cute, we'll call the leader of the business the CEO. Here's what I love. The family also has a leader that is the CEO. It's the chief emotional officer. And in a strong family business, you do have a chief emotional officer. That person is making sure that the family traditions are followed, that the family is a strong family, that people really stay connected in the family circle. There's lots of research that talks about why family businesses fail. Some research that does not get talked about as much is why family businesses succeed. Family businesses are wildly successful businesses, even though Hollywood doesn't want to talk about that, or we have things lots of TV shows and whatnot that make family businesses look totally crazy and dysfunctional. They're actually wildly successful family businesses typically. And there's a lot of research that suggests it's the fact that there's a chief emotional officer that is preventing a lot of risk in family businesses. So that leader is huge. And you must plan for succession, finding the new chief emotional officer, as well as, of course, the new person who will lead the business circle. The third part of succession then is the new leader of the ownership, finding who the new leader or leaders are, who the new owner or owners are. That new leader of ownership, as you can see in the handout, is determined by the ownership group. Sometimes that person is the chair of the board, the majority shareholder. Sometimes there is only one owner, but typically in family businesses, there are multiple owners at any given time. So that's the first piece. Really, really important. And really important to know that it doesn't have to be the same person who is the leader of ownership and the leader of the business. It certainly doesn't have to be the same person who is the leader of the family and the leader of the business. Again, if there's questions, we're happy to answer them all at the end or during this time. So second piece here in a family business is what are the most important priorities? This one can get really tricky during succession if you accidentally try to take that priority for family, which is harmony, and put that over inside of the business. Truly an ideal priority for a family business or any business is let's have a profitable business. It's kind of funny. Dave, you've probably seen this too. There's this direct correlation I see between a profitable business and a healthy family. Have you seen, or a happy family? Have you seen that one too? Right?
Well, and a lot of times, Sarah, what you'll see is the defined roles. So individuals, especially from the first generation, have a defined role within both the family unit, the business unit, their ownership. They understand what they're supposed to do at that point in time. And when you're transitioning from generation one to generation two, for instance, the roles are changing. Maybe,
Yes.
maybe dad or mom was the founder of the business. They started it in their garage or wherever it might have started. They've grown it to a point where it's a profitable business that supports the entirety of the family.
Yeah.
And now it's transitioning, right? It's transitioning from that person who knew everything from where the each nut and bolt went, all the way up through how to understand the complex financial aspects to the next generation whose role previously was only siloed in sales or in application of whatever it is that they do. So it's really interesting watching all the people grow through that. And it's important to understand when you're looking at that, and that's why that three-circle approach is so powerful. So that family business intersection, along with the ownership intersection, you have to understand as you're transitioning what those roles are.
Yes. And it's so common as you get to a second or a third generation to think, well, let's say first generation was, mom and dad, second generation is 3 kids. It's so common to think, well, we have to have harmony in the family. So we're going to have harmony in the business. We're not going to make big moves. We're going to make decisions around keeping people happy. Please do make decisions about keeping people happy in your family, but not in the business. In the business, you're ideally running a really professionally run business where having professional standards and profitability are really important. On the ownership side, it's really important to think as owners. And often people will accidentally, as owners, really just be thinking about running the day-to-day. And that first generation, a kind of ownership is running it. You're just trying to get a business off the ground. But as you get to a second, third, fourth generation, you really want to think about as owners. And when I think about ownership, I think about the owner's job is to kind of manage the seesaw, the balance of the family and the business. And I like to say, and you can see it on here, the owner's job is to maximize opportunity for the family while also maximizing opportunity for the business. The owner's job is also to minimize risk for the family and for the business. And we'll talk about some tax strategies and things that help balance that risk and opportunity. And then we'll also talk about definition of fair and ground rules and whatnot that help you really balance and be careful about really maintaining that priority in the ownership circle. People will often accidentally put that job in the family circle or in the business circle. And it really is, in my opinion, the job of the owners to be balancing. How do we take care of the family and take care of the business in the decisions that we make?
So how do you keep things fair between the various members and the owners, the family members? Maybe some of them aren't part of the business. How do you take care of that piece, Sarah?
Yeah, that's such a huge question. It's probably the number one question that I get asked in just the day-to-day running of the business, and then of course in succession too. And the biggest piece here for me is having a different definition of fair for the family than you have for the business, and then different for ownership. So in a healthy family, and we're just talking family, fair is equal. Everybody, let's say if one person gets a, $100 gift, everybody else gets a $100 gift. If one person's wedding is paid for, everybody's wedding is paid for. Or maybe if it's this amount for the wedding, it's this amount and this amount and this amount. Fair is equal in the family circle. That should be different in the business circle. In the business circle, ideally fair is market rate. You get paid for the job that you're doing. I see, and I bet you do too, Dave, lots of family businesses where they look at the next generation and they say, well, okay, everybody gets the same salary, no matter what. It drives me bonkers. Unless everybody's doing the same job and having the same performance in their role, if that actually happened in a family business, which is very unusual in any business, that there's 2, 3, 4 people who do the same exact job and perform at the same level. So ideally in the business, you pay people what they would make at another company. Statistics say that most people, most next generation family members in a family business are paid below market rate. It's really dangerous, really, really dangerous. There's often this idea of sweat equity. No, that's common in the first generation. It's unhealthy in the second, third, fourth generation. You also have to have a definition of ownership. Or a definition of fair and ownership. There is no one definition of that, except to say this: ownership, what it takes to be an owner should be clear, and it should be followed consistently. Ideas around this are some family businesses say you have to be a certain age to be an owner. You have to buy your ownership. You have to be gifted ownership. Maybe you have to work in the business. Maybe you don't have to work in the business. That must be defined and then followed consistently. We don't let one kid buy and then gift it to another kid, or vice versa. You find a way, a definition of what it takes to be an owner, and then you follow that consistently over time. That takes lots of drama, lots of yuckiness out of the systems, and it keeps it separated.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, how do they set that up? I assume there's certain ground rules and things of that nature that the different family members and business structures can set up. What does that look like from a flow standpoint, from a system standpoint?
Yeah. So that is absolutely important. And I'm actually going to start with the business. So ideally, again, if your priority is run a profitable business, profitable, well-run business, ground rules are you have to be the right person, you have to be in the right seat. So right person means you fit the values, you fit the culture of the company. You're not the one coming in and just bossing people around and yelling at everybody, unless that is the nature of your business, and then you should do that, right? But you're fitting with the culture of the business. You're a great employee. You're showing up in a positive way. You're part of the team. And then right seat means there is a job that is needed in the business, and then you are qualified to do it. What a lot of family businesses accidentally do is they say, oh, well, Sarah's in our family. Let's make a job that fits Sarah. Or they force Sarah into a job. They might say oh, we've got 3 kids and gosh, we need somebody to run sales and we need somebody to run operations and we need somebody to run finance. Okay, you do this, you do this, you do this, whether or not they're actually qualified to do it. So a really, really healthy, profitable, wise way to do this is say, what are the jobs that we need in this business? And then who's uniquely skilled to do it? And sometimes that means you don't have that person in the next generation, and you actually have to hire someone from outside of the family to run a really great business. Those can be hard conversations. But if you don't do that, you're going to end up living a hard life anyway, because you have people running the business who are not qualified to do it and are uncomfortable and suffering. Go ahead. Yeah.
Right. And one of the things that a lot of families don't look at is the internal people within their organization already that may not be family members. So,
Right.
I'm going to pick on mom this time, but mom started the business. Mom worked the business. They've got 25 employees now at this point, and mom's ready to be done with the business. But mom didn't do it all by herself, right? She has some key employees that are part of
Yes.
it, and they've worked and built that business up with mom. Although they may not be owners of the business, they may not be family members, those are essential persons in the decision making and in the right seat and the right person that the next generation sometimes overlooks. They may
Yes.
say, this person's really good, they've really done great at sales, they've run the sales department for 15, 20 years. But now Junior's coming in and they're gonna run sales. There's a lot of negative that happens with that, though. These are really bad decisions that people make. And you got to understand you want to make these decisions holistically and soundly. So you want to find people who are qualified, people who have the respect of their peers in that area.
Yes.
You know, the people who are able to actually do the job. So big hurdle. So in those decision makings, right?
It's huge. And where I think it often, the mistake that gets made is if you think about ground rules in the family, you cannot be fired as a family member, I hope, right? In a healthy family, I know there are families who do this, who fire people from the family. You know, they just say, I'm not talking to you anymore. You're out of here. You don't get your inheritance or whatnot. But in a healthy family, you cannot be fired. You cannot be kicked out of the family. But that's different than being fired from the business or not getting a promotion inside of the business. And while I cannot find research to support this that is outside of my own experience, I know it is true that the level of addiction in family business, I believe, is higher than in the general population. And my belief around that is family businesses accidentally putting Junior in the sales leader position when they're not qualified. And I don't only mean sales, I'm just using that as an example, but artificially elevating people into positions that they're absolutely not qualified for. They know they're not qualified for it. Everybody around them knows they're not qualified for it. It's an embarrassing situation to be in. Just because you're a next generation owner does not mean you have to run the business. And that's an accident a lot of family businesses make, or a mistake that a lot make, is they just think ownership means leading it. Because that's true typically in the first generation. They're the owner, they're leading it. They made the first hire and the second hire and the third hire. Great family business succession, if you don't have great leaders in the next generation, still could mean the next generation owns that business, but they don't work there all the time. Then they still get to run a great business and enjoy the profits as owners. Yeah.
That's an excellent point that a lot of people, it's checking your ego, right? I don't have to be like mom or dad or whatever it is.
Right.
I understand who I am and what my skills are and what I'm good at. Also, decision making about bringing people around you, right?
Yes.
Bringing in people who are excellent at accounting, excellent lawyers, excellent strategists, excellent in marketing. Those types of people that you bring around your organization help make sure that the transition occurs well and that you got the right people in the right seats. That's pretty fair to say. Is that another thing you see pretty commonly, Sarah?
Huge. And, checking your ego too. A lot of first or second generation folks will say, well, I busted my butt to get ownership, and so you have to too. And I'm going to make you do a job you're no good at to earn your keep. It's like, oh, I don't know, really? You're going to make the business suffer in order to, transition to the next one? Let's not do that. Let's take care of the business and build our people up. And in that, bring the decisions to the right spot. Usually that first owner is making all the decisions, or the first generation owner, they're making all the decisions in the family, all the decisions in the business, and all the decisions for ownership. And it's just all rolling around in one head. That does not work well in a next generation. Ideally, the first generation does bring those great advisors in, right? They have legal help, they have tax strategy, they have marketing help, they have financial help as they make decisions. In the next generation, whether or not you had it in the first, you definitely need it in the second. And often the second generation will say, oh, I don't know if I trust mom or dad's high school friend who's been their advisor all these years. I want to bring in somebody who I really trust. Or now it's time to work with a firm that I can grow with, over my own career, or a firm that can help the first and the second and the third generation. What's really important in this is making sure the decisions are happening in the right place. My favorite example of this is often family members will try to make decisions about who works in the business. And what I mean by that is they'll say, everybody in the family, they're guaranteed a job. The family runs it. That's not okay. The family doesn't decide who runs the business. The business circle decides who runs the business. That's a healthy decision-making pattern. Often the owners will try to make decisions about pricing. Well, this is my friend. They get a deal, right? Or right? You see this. I see the look on your face, right? The owners or the family will try to decide the pricing inside the business. No, you have to let the leader of the company choose their pricing, understand what their margin is, and run a great business. I will say the one person inside of the business that owners can choose is who's that ultimate leader of the business. You know, ideally that ultimate leader, that visionary, that integrator, that president, that CEO is reporting to ownership. Again, doesn't have to be an owner who's running the day-to-day of the business. And then you need advisors for your family. You need advisors for running the business, and you need advisors for running ownership. And if you think of those three circles, there might be an advisor who's helping you with all three, for sure, around legal pieces. There might be one advisor that helps you for all three. Around financial decisions, there might be one advisor that helps you with all three, but certainly there may be some advisors, particularly around marketing or in the day-to-day of running the business, that advisor is truly just there to serve the business circle.
And I see we've been discussing, but the sixth point in your PowerPoint is considered meetings. What does that mean?
Yeah. This is the moment when people are probably like, I'm not listening anymore, right? So I don't want to talk about meetings. Here, I really think it is important. It's important to have regular family meetings. It's important to have regular meetings inside of the business, and it's important to have regular ownership meetings. I don't just mean meetings, though. I mean really, really effective meetings. I really think it's important in the business for the leaders to meet weekly about day-to-day stuff and keeping things going, keeping accountability, making sure to-dos are getting done. I think it's important to step back every quarter and once a year to do strategic planning. I think that's important in the ownership side too, but I think owners need to meet monthly and for just kind of keeping ownership decisions going, and then quarterly and annual for more strategic decisions. And then I really think it's important for the family to meet. And one tricky thing I see a lot is people have what they call a family meeting, but it's really an ownership meeting. They're talking about the ownership of the business. They're talking about, do we buy the building? Do we sell the building? What's the rent on the building? Should we, acquire another company? They're calling it a family meeting, but it's really an ownership meeting. When I say family meeting, I mean family meeting. I mean, mom, dad, kids, their spouses, their kids. I mean, talking about family stuff, family traditions. Where is the family holiday where are those happening? How do we help support mom and dad as they age, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's what happens in a family meeting. The big decisions around the ownership of the meeting, that's an ownership meeting.
And those are important on a couple different levels of both making sure that your relationships stay strong as you see those stressors go through, because it can be difficult, as you're passing from generation to generation. I can tell you, as a father of four daughters, there's times when they were growing up that they said, hey, he's crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. We have these new methods. I remember the first time my daughter went off to business school, she came back after the first semester and said I was, how horribly I was running my businesses. She knew all these new concepts.
Great feedback. Yeah.
Right. And I was like, well, I appreciate that, sweetheart. Let's sit down. Let's talk about this. But we're talking about where we're going on vacation this summer. And so you have to keep those boundaries, right? You want that input, you want that conversation, but you want to make sure it's in the right context with the right boundaries.
Yes.
And so it's really, really important and understanding and defining those meetings that they don't blur too much. So that you have healthy relationships within the family structure, you have healthy boundaries and relationships within the business structure, and then you have healthy boundaries and relationships within the ownership structure. You're the owner of the business, but you're not really there day to day because you chose to be a physician or whatever it might be. But you really need to be aware of the business, but maybe you have a smaller role in that business, and that boundary is that you're not there every day. So.
Yes.
So really important distinctions, I think, that a lot of people make mistakes on.
It's so easy to make that mistake. And I want to throw in one thing before we get into the more, strategic and tactical questions. And one thing that can make a huge difference is when you're sitting down to have a conversation like the one that you just referenced, is at the beginning of the meeting or the beginning of the conversation, be clear who's talking to who. Is this dad and daughter? Or are these two owners talking? Are these two people working in the business? Is this an owner talking to the president? Who's actually talking to who, even though it's the same two human beings? I've had clients who have codes so that they're really clear who's talking to who. So one of my clients, when they're at home, they call each other, dad, and then the daughter's nickname. That's how they talk, like they'll address each other. At work, they use first names. Just a little code. I worked with a husband and wife who worked together, and if a business issue needed to be talked about at work, they would walk into each other's offices and leave the door open. If it was a family thing, they would shut the door. Just a code, like, I'm coming in to talk to you about a family thing. I'm shutting the door so we can talk about this thing. It's a business thing. I'm going to leave the door open. Of course, there were a handful of times that a business decision, the door needed to be shut, and then they would do that. But little simple things to make it clear. We're colleagues talking together. We're family members talking together. We're owners talking together.
Right. So what other pearls of wisdom can we talk about today, Sarah? It seems like we're on number 6 and you've hit a bunch, but you do this as a coaching aspect for businesses all over the country. I don't know if you want to speak on that a little bit, and then I might talk a little bit more about some other specific legal stuff.
Yeah, let's talk about specific legal stuff and strategy,
Okay.
and then hopefully we can help people. I know we can't talk about it all today. We can talk about how we can help them going forward.
Well, and as a lawyer, you always say, I'm gonna preface my conversation today with it depends, and I'm only gonna give a high level view because it's really specific to each individual structure. So we represent many companies throughout the states, and they're all set up differently. So when we're talking about these 6 principles, intersecting rings, and some of the strategies that are necessary, it's going to depend significantly on what the type of structure is. So many of you have talked about limited liability companies. Many of you have seen corporations. Some of you have seen limited partnerships or general partnerships. These are all different topics or structure setups that will have different implications. So when that first generation goes to the second generation, we want to make sure that we're set up in a way that allows for that transition. And in doing so, there's different tax consequences and there's different limitations and stuff. So for instance, a professional limited liability company has got to maintain ownership only by members of that particular profession. So while I'm a law firm, if I were to have a professional corporation or limited liability company, the only people who can really own my shares are other people who are indoctrinated into that profession as a lawyer. So you have to have a JD in order to own a piece of that company. So there are structural setups like that can be limitations on what happens. There's governing documents, within the operating agreements, within the bylaws that say who can, who can't, what you have to do to qualify. So we want to make sure that when we're looking at moving from generation 1 to generation 2, we're keeping all of those in mind. And even when we're setting up with that first generation, making sure that, hey, why are we choosing a limited liability company versus a corporation? What are the benefits of choosing entity 1 versus entity 2? What does that look like when I pass it on to that next generation? And so you're going to look to those governing documents, specifically stuff like operating agreements, buy-sell agreements, things of that nature that have prohibitions. You're going to want to look at what we call subscription agreements and things of that nature that are associated with shareholders. So much like your 3 rings, most company setups have what we call the Holy Trinity. They have 3 different sectors that intersect. You have what you call your officers. These are your presidents, the CEOs. These are the people who run your operations day to day. You've got your board of directors or your organizational boards. They're the people who oversee and hire and fire and manage those officers. And then you've got the shareholders or membership unit holders that may be the ones who actually vote on who the board of directors are. So they all have a relationship to each other, and they all have an intersection understanding of whose responsibilities they are. And when you get to the family businesses, many times they're the same people, right? And you have those same problems about understanding what role am I in right now. And so understanding what those shareholder agreements are, understanding what they can do will vary greatly. So for those businesses, we really tell you, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Get your advisors on tax involved right away. Get your lawyer involved right away. Get your strategists involved right away so that those things are set up way early and are very easy to identify. They're smooth to create, and they have allowed for a pretty smooth transition. It does things not only just from the legal sense and the tax sense, but everybody knows what their expectation is, right? everybody from the first generation to the second generation, even if you're selling to a third party sometimes, they know what their expectations are going to be through that process. Because a lot of small businesses may transition to, a key employee that maybe they're not related. And so that sector of the family part's out, but it's really something that's integral about how you transition that over time. Maybe you have, a principal who doesn't want to let go yet. They were very influential
Maybe,
and controlling, and how that thing got started, and they just can't let go because it's such a big piece of their identity, right? And understanding how to deal with those aspects, both from a legal structure, but from a tax structure, but in a business structure. So those are just some of the really significant legal structures and succession agreements that we would want to talk to people about. We want to sit down about how we pass from generation one to generation two. There are another really important aspects. So if we can go to the next slide, that are part of this, and that's really from an estate standpoint or a tax planning standpoint. And so this is vital. What many people in the family don't understand. And so in our Ann Arbor office, it's a little bit different than in our Tecumseh office from a lot of geography. In our Tecumseh office, we may have a little bit more agricultural based families. We may have farmers that have, lots of acreage that they operate, and they may have a business one that holds the land and a business two that operates the land. Well, when they set it up originally, they may not have done that. And they may have deducted or reduced cost structures within their tax planning that makes it so that they have a huge concern when they pass on to that next generation, right? So they'll have a tax base that's very, very low. And if you see in this slide, you'll see something called capital gains. And that's what kills so many family farms, is that they never planned for how to address that. Lots of people talked recently about a television show called Yellowstone, right? Very, very popular. It made my bourbon that I enjoy go through the roof because everybody started drinking bourbon again. But what it really did is how that show ended, they gave back the Yellowstone to the native people. The reason being is they were going to lose it to a capital gains tax. They had not done appropriate ways of guarding against those cap gains, so that when he died, they had a way of transferring that without paying a huge penalty, and the cash they just didn't have in operating that business. Because many times the wealth of a business might be held in something that's passive. It's not cash, it's land, or it's buildings, or it's things of that nature. So sitting down with your tax professional, your CPA, and your tax strategist, sitting down with your lawyer who understands these aspects. Of course, shameless plug for us, we do all this stuff. But those are the things that are really, really important to handle earlier. And there's all kinds of ways of passing this on. You talked about decision making. So we make a decision on a plan on how we're going to pass it. Let's take that. We're going to look at the trust that we're going to set up for person one, and how we're going to pass that along to trust for person two. We're going to take advantage of some tax laws about how we can do that annually and slowly pass over that ownership over time, maybe 10 years, 20 years, whatever it might look like for that individuals. It's a way of avoiding those capital gains taxes, and it's a way of avoiding some of the gift taxes. Now, the government loves to play games in this. I've been doing this for over 20 years. And when I first started off, the current estate tax value across the federal government was $667,000 before you really had to pay any kind of tax. It's up over 13 million now. Who knows what it's going to be in a year? It's a volatile time in our lives. It's a volatile time within the government about how taxes are being handled, good, bad, or indifferent. I'm not passing judgment. It's just volatile. I don't really know what's going to happen. Many of them are scheduled to sunset, and so how the federal government decides to handle those, staying up on those tax implications, how the capital gains is going to be applied, what exemptions are they going to do. These all apply to people who may not think they would apply to when we're handling those kinds of transactions. And planning way ahead is a great way to do it. The same thing goes not just for tax planning, but from balance and control. It talked about, the father who built the company or the mother who built the company, and it's all part of who they are. It's their identity. I mean, my wife will tell you she doesn't really know who I would be if I wasn't here practicing law sometimes. Because no matter where we go, the grocery store, out to eat, people will always talk to us about it. So how do you take that control, that day to day, which is a big part of who I am, and pass it on to that next generation. And how do I make those legal entities, those partnerships work so that the next generation can move that forward and continue that and have the autonomy to make decisions without me constantly meddling. So those decisions, those conversations, those are very much in line with what you were talking about, Sarah, that we see on a regular basis, that are trip hazards, if you will, for individuals moving forward in our type of business. So these are conversations that we could have. We'd love to sit down with anybody who has questions about this. I don't see too many questions in the chat at this point in time. But I really want to offer kind of an opportunity for us. Anybody who comes to one of these seminars, you've registered for it now. We'd be happy to sit down with you. We'll sit down and do a free consultation with everybody, go over what they need, what they have, what they might want, even if it's years down the road. It's just good informational aspects for everybody to have. We'd be happy to give it to us. We're pretty community-minded business in that regards. So we really want to make sure that people have the information, they're making good choices, listening to good professionals that do this stuff. Even if it's just for me to say, you don't need us to do this. This is a tax planning only issue because of the type of company it is. XYZ CPA is great at this. You don't need to pay me any money, but go see the CPA because they can help you do this form cheaper than I can do it. And then how do you connect with you, Sarah, if they need help on those aspects?
Before I talk about that, I want to say I love your approach, and that's why I was thrilled to do this, that you're willing to give time to people and that you take into consideration, here's one option you could do that might be the most perfect legal thing, but oh my gosh, it might cause a problem in your family, that you're in tune to, what are people's goals around their family and their relationships that they want. So I can't say enough how important I think it is for people to take you up on that offer. My work is typically around helping people figure out what is their ultimate goal. What do they actually want from this thing, from the transition of the business. And Sara B Stern, I love that. I didn't say this. My name is a sentence. I think that's hilarious. That's my URL there. At that web page, I have, you can sign up for my every other week family business office hour. I do not give legal advice. You have to talk to Dave about that. But I help people answer some of those questions around fairness, about relationships, about conflict, and it helped them figure out what they want out of the business. I also have on that website a very short handbook that I created that people can go through. It walks you through really important decisions to make, that they could then bring to you as their professional to say, okay, now that we know this is what we're trying to accomplish, what does our structure need to look like? What do we need to do to actually make our vision come true?
Yeah, and it's a great cost savings too, if they understand what their goals are, they're thought out, and they've spent that, then spending. I mean, we love when people come talk to us, but we understand that lawyers are expensive. I always tell people that, we're a really expensive counselor and we're not covered by insurance.
Yeah.
But
buy my book for 20 bucks. Go talk to Dave, get it done. Yeah.
Right. So thank you all for coming. If there's any questions, we'll open it up to kind of questions at this point. If not, we really like to see your feedback. I think Sarah's going to send out some kind of worksheets and some other kind of informational aspects as well. And if you ever need to get a hold of us, please let us know. Hopefully these were helpful. Hopefully you learned a little bit of something during your lunch hour. We'll try to keep them very, very short, 45 minutes. I know that's difficult for a lawyer to say, to speak succinctly and shortly, but we will try our best. So thank you so much for joining us, Sarah. I appreciate your sharing such wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me.